I happened to be reminded recently of one of the stories that is in my book, The Bloodied and the Broken, that you can find at Amazon. It's the last story in The Bloodied and the Broken, and it's about the burning of David Rothenberg. Okay, now, David Rothenberg was only 6 years old when his father, Charles Rothenberg, got very upset at the idea that the mother from whom he was divorced would not allow him to see David in the future. He had been kind of obsessed with David since David was born, and he planned on a murder-suicide and a murder-suicide that would basically destroy their bodies so nobody would even know what had happened to them. But Charles Rothenberg chickened out. He set the fire, but he didn't get burned. His son got burned. His son, 6 years old, got burned over 90% of his body, third-degree burns. Okay, and he was left disfigured and disabled for the rest of his life. And I discussed this whole thing at length in my book, in my article, which I kind of bookended it with what I thought were the two saddest stories. And the first one is the saddest, and that is the Sylvia Likens case, the torture murder of Sylvia Likens. And the second saddest, I think, was what happened to David Rothenberg. Although David Rothenberg was not killed in that fire. He was left disfigured and disabled until he died at 42. But he did survive it. And apparently he was able to cope. He said that he was, except for his obvious physical problems, he was, in fact, lived a fairly normal life. He became an artist. He was attracted to abstract art, and his paintings would sell. I've seen a few of them, and they look, to me, to my very untrained eye, they look good. And they express both his joy and his struggles. And he did have joy in his life. Now, one thing, of course, he didn't have was forgiveness for his father. And as I've discussed before, we can't always demand that people forgive. Sometimes it's just not possible. And it wasn't possible in this case. But anyway, I thought his was a very interesting story, a very sad story, but also in some ways a happy story in the fact that he was able to reconstruct his life within the limitations that had been set by his being disabled and disfigured. So, those are my comments on, also he died using the name Dave, okay? And he didn't use the name David Rothenberg because he said he wanted to free himself of the legacy of his father's and his father's criminality. His father, Charles Rothenberg, to escape the stigma and the, harassment that was inevitable to somebody who committed a monstrous crime against a child, also changed his name. And he changed it to Charlie Charles. Now, there is a kind of irony or oddness there because both of these two men changed their names in such a way as to kind of repeat the name. Charlie Charles, Dave. And I don't know if that says anything. Although maybe it just points out that there are some tendencies that are kind of inherited. And that's kind of a peculiar one. Anyway, those are my thoughts on David Rothenberg, later Dave, whose story I go into detail in the book, in the Bloodied and the Broken, which is at Amazon.